On this past Earth Day, the Open University of Hong Kong hosted the launching ceremony of carbon reduction in Hong Kong. More than 200 government officials, members of diplomatic corps, academics, members of green groups, and representatives from the business and professional sectors congregated to pledge to reduce carbon emissions in Hong Kong. In the following address, Professor Yuk-Shan Wong, president of the Open University, analyzes attitudes and hopes for environmental awareness and conservation in Hong Kong, and looks forward to drawing together different stakeholders to promote carbon reduction.
Actually, today I'm wearing two hats. On behalf of the Open University of Hong Kong, I welcome you all to this event. And as you see here, I'm also wearing another hat as the chairman of the Consumer Council of Hong Kong. I think everybody will be quite aware of the sustainable development. I think you're all talking about sustainable development every day. But for the concept of sustainable consumption, it may be a bit new to people. I'm sure in Hong Kong, everybody would know about the existence of Consumer Council. The Consumer Council's work is actually to protect the rights of the consumers and also promote the consumer cultures in Hong Kong. Since last year, we think sustainable consumption is an important task, and we need to promote this. So we have put this task as one of the important work that we have to accomplish in the coming 3 years. So this concept and this work have been put in our strategic plan. Now, for sustainable consumption, as I said, it's very similar to sustainable development. The 1994 Oslo Symposium basically talks about when we are doing consumption for products or for service, we need to concern that we should not generate toxic material, generate pollutants in the process of consumption. So while we are consuming, while we want to increase our standard of living for our own benefit, we should be concerned that we should not jeopardize the future generations of this earth. So that's a basic concept of sustainable consumption. So some people might say, sustainable consumption or SC means no consumption. No, it's not that way. SC is not no consumption. SC is not consuming less. SC is not poor economy, and it is not lower quality of life. We want to be spending wisely. You want to have a smart consumption. And this is why we are doing this in Hong Kong. Why do we need sustainable consumption? Because human consumption continuously and significantly impacts upon the environment. Over the past 50 years, you would know that there is economic growth. We're consuming goods and service, which on one hand foster economic growth, but on the other hand also creates environmental impact and deterioration. For example, in the past years, the population has grown from 7 billion and will be 9 billion very soon. And of course, this would bring in economic growth, but it also changed our lifestyle. Like some people are depending too much on meat, some people starting to build up so-called throwaway society, and this kind of thing is changing our lifestyle, so that we have to face it and we have to change it. How to achieve SC? There are many ways. For example, increasing efficiency of consumption, we could achieve by the advancement of technology, we could achieve by eco-efficient support. And also we need to change our behavior, change the pattern of our living. The attitude and behavioral change is important. Nowadays, people know about the environmental protection, but they are still hesitate to change their own behavior in order to achieve it. So this is the main point that we have to change. A few months ago, in last August to September, Consumer Council of Hong Kong conducted a survey in whole Hong Kong. We interviewed more than 1,000 citizens with age from 16 to 65. And we want to develop a baseline picture about Hong Kong consumers' awareness, behavior, and readiness towards SC. And also to understand to what extent and which aspect of sustainability influence consumers' current purchasing. So we want to know the baseline, and in future we might do this again, and then we could compare. These are our findings. So we want to know three things, as I said: awareness, behavior, and readiness. Now, first part is for awareness. We want to know the concern of the citizen over the environment and products, and we want to understand what do they know about SC. What do they think about the relationship of their living with the SC? The first part of the results about their concern of the environment, you see about 38% do concern. They know it. It's partially because over the years, we have been quite successful in doing environmental education. So most of the young people particularly, they know it, they heard about it. And particularly the higher income people, they are more concerned than lower income people. So the awareness is not bad. And for the impact of consumption pattern upon the environment, you see also 38% of these people are aware of the big impact of this into the environment. And particularly in the younger generation, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, we should also know that about 22% know very little. So there is also a lot of room for improvement. For the understanding of the concept of this, you can see on the orange bar, there's still 44% of people, they don't quite understand. And these are mainly on the older generation, from 45 to 64 years old. But it's interesting, the majority, about 94% of the people indicate that the survey does enhance their understanding. So actually, the survey is useful to enhance the awareness of people. Then next, we ask them, what does SE means to you when you heard about this? What do you think? Most people think this is related to future generations, which is quite right. And they are looking for environmental protection, and the society has to consume more efficiently. This is what the laymen understand about the SE. However, only 39% felt you need to consume less. So actually, not many people think that sustainable consumption means asking you not to buy things or not to consume. For the layman, usually, when they ask about SC, they relate to this thing. About 70% relate to recycling of waste, using energy more efficiently, avoiding harmful substance, so on and so forth. So in summary, Hong Kong people's intuitive understanding of SC is quite close to the UN's definition. So it's not bad. And most people agree that SC is a pivotal and powerful to sustainable development. But few people felt that they should consume less, and they most strongly embrace SC ideas related to their own daily experience, such as waste reduction, recycling, energy conservation, and so on. But less concerned with more remote issues at a higher moral ground, for example, fair trade and animal welfare. So this is the situation for the first part on environmental awareness. The second part is the consumer behavior. Now, for consumer behavior, it is related to purchasing behavior. They are more interested on energy efficient appliance, carrying your own bags, stop using plastic bags. This is more conventional. I think they all agree. But for something like asking them to buy more green label products, green label food, they are more reluctant. By answering questions, they said in Hong Kong, the availability is not that much, and also they are usually more expensive. So they are reluctant to do it. For consumers' behavior, for those more easy to do things, they are happy to do it. For example, when you're leaving the room, you turn off their lights, they will be happy to do it. When you use energy-saving light bulbs, they will be doing it. Or conserve water, people would agree and they will practice it. But for other things, like ask them to turn off the air conditioner or to increase the temperature. For example, in summertime, you ask them not to have air condition or to put the air condition on 25 degrees or 26 degrees, they will be very reluctant. So this is Hong Kong people's habit. and we still have to tackle it. For conservation behavior, usually Hong Kong people are not bad. They are willing to walk, and they're willing to take public transportation. But if you ask them not to take the plane or take less planes, they will not agree because people travel a lot. We all know that taking a plane is actually not that environmental friendly. So the summary of the consumer's behavior, there's still much room for Hong Kong people to enhance their SC behavior, to change to always, not just usually. Now basically people are usually or sometimes. And also it's interesting to see the difference in age groups. For the older people, although they less concerned about the environment, but the good thing is for the older people usually want to recycle things. And they always like to pack uneaten food home. So the older people, you see the difference. So people need to be helped to convert good intentions into the action, better education, better infrastructure, better information, so on and so forth. The third thing is the readiness. Now this is the important part. In Hong Kong, people, they know it, they are aware, but when you ask them to do, well, some people would like to do, but most people would something of wait and see. So in other words, you could say that they are not really that aware, and that is what we have to do to promote, to raise the public awareness, to really change their lifestyle. That's the key thing. So here, how much more would you be prepared to pay? Now, this is an interesting question. We asked them, if you want to be more environmental, want to buy green products, do you want to do it? And do you want to do it and pay a little bit more price? Surprisingly, in Hong Kong, 75% of people, they're willing to do it. They're willing to do that. They don't mind to pay a little bit higher and to have these green products. That's a good sign. And particularly in the higher income people, which is understandable. When you're asking them the motives, the reason for making environmental or sustainable purchase, the top reason is this, at the top you could see it, is environmental protection. They know this is high moral ground, energy conservation and future generation for our sons and daughters. And if they're not doing it, why they're not doing, what are the reasons? These are the so-called reasons. They said they don't have enough information. And when they're doing this, buying green labels or green products is more expensive. And they don't have enough good, suitable products available in the market. This is what the respondents said. So they want to have more information provided, and they want government to have more commitment on that. They want government to drive. But they agree that we should gradually change our lifestyles. So this is the summary of the readiness part. Only about half of the respondents said they usually purchase sustainable products. And young consumers and students claim that they would be prepared to pay more, but they are not yet translated into action. They have to wait and see. And one of the information they said is their lack of information and high price. They are main factors to holding consumers back. So this is the reason towards SC. Then, when we have all this data, the data we process to generate the so-called SCI, Sustainable Consumption Index, with a main index and also 3 sub-index. Now, one index is for the awareness, another is for the behavior, the third index is for readiness. If you look at the results, let's say the first one is the awareness and attitude towards sustainable consumption, which include concern of product information, attitude towards energy conservation, attitude towards waste separation. Now for this part, the index is 73.5. You will ask whether this is high or low. Now we are quite pioneer. It's in the world, not too many cities, they have this kind of SCI. We are among the first one to do this. Now, the score is from 0 to 100. So I would say 73.5 is not bad. And the second part is on the behavior, which includes purchasing behavior, conservation behavior, and so on. It's 69.2. Again, is not bad. The third part is more tricky. It's talking about the readiness, the real action. Now this is Drawing down the score is the consumer's willingness to purchase products in consideration of sustainable consumption. Now, the score is not very high. As I said in the survey, people are reluctant to do this. And because of this, the total SCI for this part is only 65.2. So this is the index we obtain. And in future, we hope to compare with other cities in the world. And also, we hope to compare with similar index maybe 2 years, 3 years later, for example. So the summary for the first survey that we have done last year is a high-level awareness and concern of SC among Hong Kong people. And as I said, this is partially because of our education. People are aware of it. And they support most strongly issues they can directly experience, such as waste reduction and energy conservation. And action is greatest only for simple behaviors, such as switching off the lights or bringing shopping bags. For more difficult parts, such as turning off the air conditioner, to do less air travel, people are more reluctant. So there is still a lot of room for us to do. Now, what to do next, the way forward? I think the Consumer Council in the next few years would continue to promote and to work with other organizations to enhance our awareness on sustainable consumption. And we think there are 4 key stakeholders to do this very difficult, rather difficult endeavor. They are, first, consumers, means the citizens. Every citizen is a consumer. Consumer Council and other NGOs, including many of you sitting here, the government and the business. So the first thing for the consumer, that is for a citizen, we want them to understand this is the citizens' responsibility to make themselves informed of the consumption impact to environment and take action, not only talking. It's like to change your lifestyle. Now, this is difficult, but this is eventual and influential. The second key stakeholder is the organizations, including Consumer Council and other NGOs. We need to work together for this behavioral change. We need to have international cooperation. We are working with other consumer councils all over the world. And we can act as a coordinator among all these stakeholders. And thirdly is the government. We think it's very crucial. The government needs to take some lead to have a coordination among bureaus and statutory bodies. Government should have good planning on this, to have an analysis and disclose of the useful data to the public. And even government could consider giving some incentive or subsidies for industry or whatever people who are willing to produce more environmental friendly green product and service, so on and so forth. So government should need to take the lead. Lastly is education. I mean, the EDB, they need to put this in the curriculum so that it would get our next generation better educated in this area. As I said, consumer is actually the driving force, because if the consumer's lifestyle change, they would drive the production, they would drive the industry. So the industry also needs to be more proactive to produce more sustainable products for the local market. At the present, I think there are few. Lastly, is industry needs to be more open. At the moment, for some of the list companies, in their annual reports, they put some information about environmental protection and things like that. But in most annual reports, didn't cover this, or just cover it very superficially. So in future, environmental, social, and governance part should become an important report in the big corporations. So all in all, we know that sustainable consumption is important, it's interesting, but it's not easy. We need to work hard. And this is a long journey, or I call it a long march. So this long march will start from me. This actually translates from the Chinese saying, 千里之行，始於足下，可持續消費從我做起. It has to start from ourselves, from me, from you. So this is the basic thing. And I hope the citizens, the NGOs, Consumer Council, government, and business have to work together to make this become more close to us. So thank you very much. Thank you.
In the second address, engineer Albert Lai, Chief Executive Officer of Carbon Care Asia, reports on the progress made at the 2015 United Nations Climate Change Conference held in Paris.
I'm glad to be able to share with you some of our experience when we were in Paris last December. As we all know, this is a landmark summit. And we hope to bring the message home because we do feel that there's an important role for Hong Kong and for all of us here. Well, of course, I mean, today our focus is on this carbon. I think very few of us realize how much 1 ton of carbon means from this figure. This photos was actually taken in Copenhagen when we attended another UN summit in 2009. Well, we all know that Hong Kong, on average, produces 6 tons of carbon per year, per capita. But in addition, echoing Professor Wong's message about consumption, if we take into account of the imported products, that means the embedded carbon footprints, there is an additional 9 tons per capita per year. So actually Hong Kong ranks second in the world. So this is not a light matter. Now, just to give you an idea of the convoluted route to the Paris discussion, this all started a long time ago. I mean, you may say that it started all 6 years ago from Copenhagen, and there's been many different types of meetings and conferences and summits, and then there are also very complicated issues from adaptation to mitigation and financing and so on. So to cut the long story short, we have actually missed our target because the international committees meant to agree a protocol before 2012 when the Kyoto Protocol expired. But then still we have to move on, and so here is the Paris Agreement. So this is one of the photos we took when we arrived at the conference. I mean, we have a team of I think around 13 members. There's a delegation. In total, there are 195 countries in the negotiation, and this is the China Pavilion. And you have to imagine that to create a consensus among all 195 countries is not easy at all, because any one of them can veto the agreement. And in addition, there is a lot of civil society activism there, because like all UN conferences, they all understand that it is important to have people's engagement in order for the government representatives to reach a deal. So we can see protests all around in the conference halls. Now, these people are from the Pacific Islands. I mean, these islanders are an important part of the negotiation because they are voicing out an ambitious target, because for them, the 2-degree warming targets, mostly talked about by scientists, actually is meaningless for them, because with 2 degrees, I mean, all the islands will be drowned. So whether it's 2 degrees or 3 degrees, it doesn't really matter to them. So they were actually advocating a global warming target of 1.5 degrees at the most. So after 2 weeks of negotiation, we came to an agreement. If I can give you a bit of highlights on what we have achieved. Now, unlike the Copenhagen negotiation, this is a bottom-up agreement, meaning that all the countries, overall about 180 countries, have pledged their own voluntary carbon reduction. So that is why we can come up with agreement. But the problem with this type of bottom-up agreement is that if you add up all the pledges together, we cannot really meet our target, because what we have achieved here is actually 2.7 degrees, and that is far more dangerous than even the most conservative scientists agree on. But then in the Paris Agreement, there's a very clear provision that all parties should aim to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees. And thanks to the islanders and the activisms of all the least developed countries, they were able to get all the countries to agree to a clause, which I think is a landmark achievement. That is to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. Now, knowing that we are already experiencing about 1 degree global temperature rise, and this 1.5 degrees is a very, very ambitious target. Some believe it is impossible to achieve. But having said that, with all these targets set in, really high ambition targets set in, we really have to achieve zero carbon emissions between 2050 and 2100. And that is exactly why we are here today, because we have to move to a zero carbon economy very quickly. Otherwise, we would not be able to achieve the targets at all. And these are targets agreed by all the 195 heads of countries and not just by NGOs. Because of this discrepancy, all the delegates realize that unless we take stock every 5 years and improve our pledges every 5 years, we will not be able to meet those targets at all. And that's why there's what we call a stock-taking mechanism and ratcheting up mechanism to make sure that countries offer more every 5 years. Now, this is a summary of the big picture. This is where we are now. We are already about 1 degree. Even this year, 2016, is likely to be the warmest year on record, breaking the record of last year. The business as usual case is about 4 degrees or worse. And then the UN target here is 2 degrees, but then also the stretch target is actually 1.5 degrees. So the question is that how can we make sure that we would be able to change our own behavior and change our entire economic model to turn from 4 degrees back to 1.5 degrees. And that is the challenge here for all of us today. So this is actually a very alarming curve. So I would urge you to only look at the green band because this is the only way that we can achieve the 1.5 targets. If you look at this now, we had to have a very dramatic decrease in carbon emissions, and that by 2050 or by 2060 at the latest, we got to achieve basically zero carbon emissions, or net zero carbon emissions. So essentially, we are talking about a revolutionary change in our economic model. After coming back from the summit, our colleagues get together. We get a summary on what we should do, or what the government should do, and what business should do. I pick up a few points about the top 10 government agenda that we think that we all have to work on. I think one of the tangible targets for Hong Kong as a whole is that we really need to establish this 80 by 50 targets. What it means is that by year 2050, we got to cut our absolute carbon emissions by at least 80%. Now, one may think that this is impossible, but look at this chart. 17 cities all around the world, many of them comparable to Hong Kong, international cities like London or New York or Sydney and so on, they are committing themselves to be carbon neutral or at least 80% carbon reduction by 2050. And many of them actually have committed to 100% renewables much earlier. For example, Copenhagen has committed to 100% renewables by the year 2025. And London has committed to 80% reduction by 2050. And if you look at other cities like, say, San Francisco, they're also committing to 80% reduction by 2050. Now, I invite you to look at the names of these cities. Out of these 17 cities, only one city comes from Asia, which is Yokohama. They are the only Asian cities that has committed themselves to this 80-50 targets. I think it's fair for us to ask why. So I think for Hong Kong as an international city, or Asia's world city, as we like to claim ourselves, we really have no excuse of not committing ourselves or joining this Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance. Because all these 17 cities are cities with resources like Hong Kong. Actually, we are much richer than many of them. So by joining this Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, we will be able to share the best practice with them. Now, in fact, it's not just cities. The latest news comes from Sweden. Now, they have passed a law to commit themselves to become carbon neutral by 2045 as a country. But more than that, you have countries, smaller countries like Bhutan and Costa Rica, but you also have Norway. These countries have already committed themselves to carbon neutral before 2050. So there's no reason why Hong Kong should not move much bolder. And the other objective we think should be at the top of our agenda is to get on to renewables with a full steam transition by removing all the regulatory hurdles and incentivizing a broad-based participation. Now, if you look at Hong Kong, we are barely using our potential. Now, one might say that Hong Kong is already complexities, a lot of the rules are actually unusable and so on. But is that the case? Central Policy Unit, CPU, commissioned a study by PolyU last year, and they come up with the conclusion that if we use Hong Kong's rooftops on all the buildings, we can produce about 7% of all our electricity demand. And if we use our public open space, we can produce another 7%. And then we're talking about 14-15% in total. Whereas our renewable energy target at the moment is only 1%. Okay? Of course, we will not be able to use all the rooftops, but then if we even use only 1/3 of our rooftops, we will be able to achieve 5%, right? So that is the kind of potential that we have. But the biggest hurdle that we have now is that we are lacking feed-in tariff because unlike many countries in the world, actually in total there are about 50 countries in the world, there is a feed-in tariff arrangement so that if you are able to generate solar in your home or in your building, you'll be able to feed in and sell back to the grid. And that is a great incentive. So actually the lack of renewables is destroying many of our business opportunities. Like many of these companies, they have committed to buying renewables. So unless we are able to commit to renewables quickly, we will be missing many of these opportunities. System change. Now, I know many of us, whether it's business or government departments, have started different types of showcase, but that is not enough. We need to move to systemic change right away, whether it's in building design or energy efficiency. Like electric vehicles, we only have 3,000, but we are talking about 680,000 vehicles on the roads, and they are not electrical. So when are we going to change the business model from a private vehicle model to a shared car model, for instance? And innovation, we do need a lot of innovation, and that is the key to success. Now, many people feel that we are not able to move so quickly, but if you look at the picture on the left, this is the Fifth Avenue in New York in 1900. You can see all these horse carriages. If you tell New Yorkers in 1900, you will not be able to see any horse carriages within 10, 15 years. They'll be laughing at you. But look at this picture in 1913. 13 years later, no horse carriages can be found, almost, in the Fifth Avenue. So if we are committed to change, that can change very quickly. I hope that we can work together and take bold action, whether you're from business, from NGO, from government departments. This is really a question that we have to work on, and that we have no choice for ourselves and for our future generations. Thank you.